industrial futurist, and Brent is with us. Brent is a dynamic and sought-after keynote author and thought leader. He has been featured and cited in prominent publications, including the Harvard Business Review, Chief Learning Officer Magazine, Workforce.com, BBC News, and many more. At Shell, Brent was an award-winning, innovative learning and development executive who was the driving force that envisioned, designed, and operationalized many of Royal Dutch Shell's most critical global learning transformations of the 21st century. The initiatives he led in multiple leadership roles, culminating in his serving as head of learning strategy and innovation at Shell, earned the company recognition as a world leader in human resource management and learning organization. Brent, it's always a masterclass when you share your wisdom and expertise with us. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Jose, and I appreciate that wonderful introduction. So thank you very, very much. 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and what I want to talk to folks about today is Workforce 2022. Are we at a tipping point, or is it more of an inflection point? You know, I start these things and I think about the world in terms of this times of greatest hope are the times of greatest turbulence. And I think we're in an era now where we are seeing a lot of things dynamically going on. And so when I think about tipping points, a lot of times, you know, we've got COVID that really was a catalyst over the last 4 or 5 years. And we can have these negative tipping points, which really we're switching from this desirable stability or to an undesirable. So is the ball rolling down the hill? Or as I look at it, is this great resignation, this great awakening, creating a inflection point to really say it's going to be positive, and we can indeed change the trajectory of where we're at. So this talk is really about the context of where we're at, where we've come from, and where I hope we can get going in this world of work. So anytime I do a talk, I want you to know a set of things that are be presented in this context, and I want you to feel a certain way about those things. And you know, I've gotten into so much research lately about the brain chemicals and, you know, integrating those into the workplace and designing jobs and roles that, you know, trigger these positive chemicals, these happy chemicals in the work that we do as we especially automate. And how do we create new work cycles and designs that are more positive for people and just, again, not that drudgery. Oh, also, when I'm done, I hope you do something. You take some of the knowledge and some of the feelings that hopefully come out of this, and we give you a bit of a time to think. So 5 slides, and I just want to get you the context of work, and I won't take too long to do that. But if you look at things almost like in bookends, in 1918, we had the Spanish influenza, and everybody was walking around wearing masks. And then 52 years later, we had OSHA, and OSHA was formed where it was really the start of automation with a lot of the machining of industry. And the other thing that we started to have on these things is when we saw these things, in 1918, during this time, 1 out of every 5 workers nationwide walked out in strikes. They weren't happy at work. Then you had the Fair Labor Standards Act come in 1938, where we eliminated, the child labor that was so predominant. We put in the 8-hour workday, and we did a lot of the reform of what work looked like and what it felt like. But then also in that 1970, when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, he was in Memphis on a mission to help striking workers. And then again, now we've got 2022 with this COVID bit and this awakening. So the next year is going to be 2074 in this bit. And why I put the slide up here, it's really simple. If you look at these times, it's the same time of 52 years between the 3 dates. And if you would have said, 1918 to 1970, that seemed like it was such a long time ago. Well, it's really not. in 1970 to 20. So we see this about time going fast. And in this slide, I want to tell you the same thing, because the year 1868 to 1918, and then as I said, 1930, the Fair Standards Act, it's only 70 years. But in this time, we had these social reformers for work. And this first picture was Winslow Homer. He would do sketchings of people going into the industrial textile mills in New England. And you can see the drudgery and the toil on their face. And you can see them going in with their buckets for lunch. And you can see the children going in, and the men and the women and the older people. Then the next picture, Lewis Hine was our next photojournalist. He did a lot of documentation of the steel industry. He actually did the first socio-economical study of industry in the Pittsburgh Allegheny steel mills. And they studied the living conditions of the workers. They studied the work conditions, and that led to a lot of reform. But this picture, Lewis Hine took this, and these were coal mine boys called breaker boys. They would sit in the coal mines and break stone from coal. And in this day, two of these breaker boys, when Lewis Hine took that picture, they died that day. The next picture in the same year was the garment district in New York City, where the famous Triangle Fire occurred. Now, hopefully you've heard about this. It gets celebrated as a remembrance every year because 146 immigrant women were killed in this fire. They were on the 9th and 10th floor because that was cheaper to put them there than on the bottom floors. The building was pretty much all wood. The women worked with sewing machines that had big cans of oil, scraps of material, clothing material. The doors were locked because the supervisors didn't want them to go out on smoke breaks. The fire escapes didn't really work, and a fire started. And unfortunately, 146, many of these women jumped out of the building. There were nothing to catch them, really. They went down elevators and died, and it was a horrific disaster, but it did result in over 30 forms of safety legislation that were defined for working conditions. And then a few years later, we had the Great Train Wreck. And again, it was the most devastating passenger car incident in industrial history, where over 100 people died. And these two trains collided, and they collided because of poor procedures, bad signaling, bad training, everything related to a lot of the safety precautions. And it also resulted in great reform. You might not know it, but passenger cars are made of steel today because of that incident. So you can see in that short time period of 70 years, 249 souls just in these three incidents paid the ultimate sacrifice, and it resulted in a lot of the change in legislation that we have today. So that's just the context I wanted to give you, that there was a time when humans were really treated as industrial cattle, and many of them paid the ultimate price to get much of the reform that we have today. The second thing is, when automation started, culturally, at least in the United States, we had an era where the human being was a very, very poor substitute for automation. So if you look at like Paul Bunyan, this is when chainsaws and power tools were starting to change the lumber industry. The gentleman bending the steel rod was Joe Magarak. And Joe Magarak, in Magarak in Croatian actually means donkey. But he was, the fabled greatest worker in the steel industry. And then you can see John Henry there, who fought the steam engine. So we had built this entire society of culture around the human fighting the automation and what would become of them. So it's ingrained in our culture. So a lot of times we wonder why people fear automation. Well, it's been bred into us for hundreds of years now. Same thing here with a lot of our literature. I love the story of the little match girl, but if you know the story, it was about the little girl who sold matches, and she was freezing one evening, and instead of going home because she didn't sell her matches and facing her father, she decided to burn the matches she had, and each time she burnt the match, she had a vision of a better life that she had. And ultimately, in the end of the day, she had died. But this was the even in the literature, we were writing stories around industrialization and how industrialization was thwarting the development of people's emotions, humanity, and imagination. So again, when we talk about digital transformation, we talk about where we're at from a culture and climate. We've had decades and generations of these kinds of stories where a lot of our fear comes in. But now we fast forward and we're in the era of humans collaborating with automation. And this is the era that we say, now, if we can marry the human spirit of collaborative powers, of intellect, of creativity, those things that automation can't do, then we can really marry up. So we can have these biomechanical workers and augmented workers and the virtual reality type workers and the healthy workers with the sensors and the devices that help them monitor themselves, or the social worker, meaning the person that's digitally connected or collaborative. So these are the types of workers that we're trying to do, and the skills that we need to start to build. And I talk a lot about power skills. And when I mean power skills, I don't mean supercharged soft skills. I mean power skills as the skills that humans can do, but automation can't. And those are the skills that we've got to start building in our community colleges and our universities. These are the ones that are going to excel the next generation of workers. These are the ones that are going to help workers change the work week, change how work is organized and structured and what humans are valued for. We don't want humans searching for data. We don't want humans toiling and trying to assess the quality of data. We want them thinking, collaborating, and creating. And that's the era of Industry 5, where we go from this mass productivity that will be addressed by automation, and we want humans to do the mass personalizations of products and services and delivery channels. So that's kind of the back of where we came from, where I hope that we start to go. And now we talk about tipping point, inflection point, human condition at work. And so again, I've given you a lot of these industries, and I hope all of you know around Industry 4.0, and you also, you'll say, well, geez, Industry 5.0 came up so fast. It did, because this idea of the peopleless factory, smart production, the autonomous plant, what they failed to think about in that German summit in 2011 when we coined Industry 4.0 is the ability of cyber-physical connectivity, just not to connect things in the plant, so sensors, drones, tags, equipment, machinery, but how's the human fit into that? And this is this whole idea, as we automated, level one was really, let's automate the repetitive things, the precision things that humans aren't that great at. Let's automate the things that now maybe are unsafe for humans to do. We don't want them climbing on tall towers. We don't want them in dangerous confined spaces. So that's where automation is. Now automation's got to go to marry that human bit to say we're going to personalize, because that's what everyone wants in their supply chains, their products, and their services. And this is the human touch to industry. So yes, smart production will make production cheap. It'll equalize it across the globe, so you won't have these low-cost zones so much anymore, because you'll be equalizing industry performance to automation, where we'll increase the human focuses in that mass personalization. So I know that Holly talked earlier today about digitization and transformation. And again, look at the research, and you'll find that research is anywhere from 70 plus to 80 plus to almost 90 of digital transformations fail. And they fail primarily because of human resistance, or human skills, okay? Because we're designing these solutions and we're not factoring in the human condition in digital transformations. We're still leaning on digital and automation as cost and as production, and we need to balance it to see the value for humans, because otherwise they'll still thwart it. The big thing now, as we look around the universe that we live in, is these trends. And the big trend, this crossroads that we're at, is what should work look like and who decides, okay? So we look at these statistics I put here, and I'm sure you're familiar with all of these things about, you know, the engagement rates or lack of it, the quit rate in manufacturing, and again, this whole idea that the medical, you know, work-related stress is now the 5th leading cause of death, at least in the United States. And it leads to these unhealthy behaviors. And go back to those brain chemicals I talked about. You know, we're feeding people negative chemicals. You know, we need to get them to positive, because what's happening is, I believe, and I have this belief, that a good work environment creates a healthy, mentally happy worker. That worker goes home and is pleasant to their family, their spouse, their children. They are able to have time to do things. They are happier. Happy families create happy communities, and happy communities help to make a positive society. And when people aren't happy, they do drug abuse, alcohol abuse, they overeat, they get stressed out and they don't want to exercise, and they do all these things where it's just drudgery. And we need, and again, we're not in those old pictures of those old days again. You know, it's been, since the Fair Labor Standards Act, I think it's been 70 plus or 80 some years since that. But these are the things that we've got to jump, okay? And again, people are pushing back because these human capital options are shifting. I envision, an idea that I have is that you won't work for one company in the future. Like, you know, we sell our souls oftentimes to one company that gets to own us, and, you know, that's, you know, they bought us. Well, I look at it in terms of, you might work for 3 companies. You might spend, you know, 2 days a week working for one company, a day working for another company, 2 days, or however you want to work it. Again, these are the things that are societies. It's shifting because people want it to shift, and they're pushing it. You know, we now have in a lot of manufacturing industries, you know, the turnover rates, the lack of attendance rates, the recycling of employees that aren't in the role long enough to become proficient or autonomous. So what do people want? I did this slide about a year ago. You know, people want meaningful work. They want human-centric job support. And what I mean by that is they want support that is easy to use. It has the experience conditions of it. It's not hard things to do. It actually helps them and is designed to help them. So, you know, and they also want to be digitally fluent. You know, I do a lot of consulting with big corporations on their learning environment, and I try to express to them, being digitally fluent and helping your employees be digitally fluent makes them more employable, and that's what they want. And so you're just not investing in digitizing your content for people. You're giving them a better experience, and you're giving them better skills so they can go and say, I've worked with digital content. I know how to do more analytical or computational thinking. And they also want smarter social connectivity. You know, they want the net promoter scores. They want to be able to get credit for what they share, because we're now moving from this era of knowledge is power, something I hold on to, something I don't give up, to something that helps me build my personal brand at work. So who knocks on Brent's door? Well, they all knock on Brent's door because he shares in a nice way, and he's got great content. and he's known for that. So, you know, what do you want to be known for? And again, what people want is this fulfillment and flow. They want to know that their work is meaningful, it's valued, it's purposeful, and they want flow. You know, if I stare out the window of my office or cubicle and the manager walks by, the old reaction is, what are you doing? Daydreaming? No, you know, but if they saw me hustling and struggling to find data or compile some data that I shouldn't have to spend my time compiling or finding, that's work. But to imagine, to create, to think, and to have that flow. Again, most people aren't productive because they don't have flow. They get interrupted. We've got too many devices, too much information coming to us, and we need to structure jobs so that people actually get time to think, get time to create, get time to be socially connected. So these are some of the trends that I see. And again, when you look at the experience factor, you know, these bubbles are what people want. You know, they want to say, I belong. You know, there's some relatedness to them at work and how they fit in. They want to be valued. They want to be employable, and they want to say that I'm just not doing mundane, routine things to get a paycheck, but I'm building my personal brand. I'm making myself employable. I'm making myself more transferable to other avenues of employment or skill sets. And because again, job tenures will go up, they're going to go up more and more. You know, they want inspired and they want to be supported. So it all goes to this emotional signatures that companies create. You know, they want that clear state of security. They want to get out of this turnstile of reorganizations. And I've talked to one of my friends in the oil industry. He's gone through 5 reorganizations in the last 6 years. And so these are some of the things we've got to you know put a bit of a cause to. And most of all, they want to say, I'm okay. I've got mental health and I've got well-being, and that's what's steady on my feet. But this is the employee experience movement that we've got to really think of. We've got to think about it when we automate, when we digitize, when we transform. And the last thing I'll tell you with my little globe with the eyeballs is transition. And I won't go too long at this, but you know, some people have the point, as Frederick Douglass said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. And I started the bit of the talk today with the quote of, you know, great hope always comes in the times of greatest turbulence. So, you know, this is what we're facing today. And we want an era where automation accentuates the human being. It gets those brain chemicals going. It makes them employable. It elevates their skill sets that are uniquely human. Well, that's what we want to do. And again, doing transformation my entire career, I've never escaped Brent's arc of organizational drama. There's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. And middles are messy no matter what you do in life. The middle of something, whether you're painting a room or whether you're, you know, changing oil in your car or whatever you might be doing. And it goes through these archetypes. You know, everybody has the archetype. You know, some people are heroes, some are antagonists. But you've got this bit where the hero wants to digitally transform something in a company. Then you've got the antagonist, and they come in many forms. They could be individuals with bias. They could be processes, they could be systems to block, they could be just culture, whatever those things might be, they will attack the hero or heroes. Then you'll have this rising action as you try to digitize or transform or automate in a human-centric way that, you know, people will find out, because when you do things, you figure things out. You figure, oh, there's bandwidth issues, or there's installation problems, or there's receptivity problems, or cloud pricing. I didn't know we had to pay for cloud usage and on a basis. And then you'll get into all the drama and the tension of saying, we're in trouble. Did we make a mistake? Did this guy or person or woman have the capability that we entrusted them to do? Then you sort things out and you resolve and you recognize and you start the next cycle. So you've created this point B, this new status quo. And then so when you create a new status quo that's better than the old, the next thing to do in some time is to revisit that status quo and look to look to supercharge it again. So all these things create conflict. That's why automation will take care of productivity on the mass scale, but people will take care of the personalization, the humanity, the collaboration, the creativity, the innovation as things that they're best suited to do, and we need to prepare that new generation of workers to do that. And so what I would say is, just to end and summarize, we want a sustainable workforce. And, what do I see as sustainable? What work looks like and who decides must shift. It's got to go from this patriarchal position that the company decides everything to there's cooperation, collaboration, emotional signatures, employability. It's something that makes people want to stay and retain. Employers need to embrace these economics of emotion. I believe that a company's emotional signature is going to be more valuable than their external brand in the coming years. Digital transformation has to go human. I've seen so much digital transformation fail because it hasn't been human. And again, this whole hyper focus on empathetic leadership. It's a new style of leadership that we don't have a lot of leaders out there that are very good at it because they don't know the rules for it yet, because not a lot of people have really done it. And it's always been the exception that I had a great leader. And most of the times, if you look back and you talk about the best leader you ever had, they were probably pretty empathetic. You probably trusted them because, they had great credibility, they were reliable, and they had a level of intimacy with you of care and candor, and they didn't have a super high self-interest. And I think if you find, like in most of your relationships, anything you don't trust probably is weak in one of those variables of that trust equation. So anyways, I want to stop there, and I'm going to turn it back to Jose. And again, I'll end with what I started. Hopefully there's some nuggets in here that sparked your interest, maybe get your brain chemicals thinking a little bit and feeling a certain way to your personal context, to your personal situation, what you can do for yourself or the others around you. And then, what is the point of action out of anything? Because we always hope that if we invest our time and attention, we can do something of value for us or others with that. So Jose, that's all for me on these slides.
That's fantastic, Brent. It's always tremendously insightful to see your perspective on the human side of change and transformation, and the evolution that we're seeing in the industry. If I may ask you to stop showing your presentation screen and keep your camera on, and I'll bring my camera on as well, asking the audience to continue to submit your questions here. And Brent, one of the first questions have to do with moving in this direction and implementing some of these concepts that you're talking about. What can you do, let's say, in your organization today to start moving in this direction? What are some of the things and actions that you can take to start implementing some of these concepts? What does that look like?
Right. So if you look at some of the big things that go on, like I'll use myself as a personal example. So I work with a lot of companies, and what I have found is my most productive day and the day that I'm happiest is, I don't want to shock it, but it's on a Saturday, because I'll watch a football game, I'll sit and I'll be creative and no one interrupts me. I'm in my zone, my flow, and I want more Saturdays in my weekdays. So it's one of the things that you do is figure out in the personas of your work, what do people really want? What are they really valuing? And I'm seeing organizations with significant problems that are simple. And this is the thing that we've got to do. Like, we talked earlier, Jose, about just a simple digitization of content for people that makes it ready, relevant, personalized, and adaptive to them. It's very simple to digitize content, but companies don't do it. And so it's a lot of these kind of things because they're still apprehensive. I mean, I find that companies are still being a bit fearful in the innovation cycle.
And a follow-up to that, Brent, how can you influence leaders on this direction? Because you work in a pretty large organization. You advise a whole lot of different organizations who are very large, and large organizations especially, they have structures and they have people who got in certain positions over time. And how do you start influencing those people to have this view? Because my gut feel is that most of certainly in the larger organizations, that the very few leaders in those larger organizations are kind of employing an empathetic style of leadership. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what is your perspective on that? And then and how can we influence leadership to say that this is a worthwhile pursuit?
Right. So if the first question is, how do you create influence, right? And so I love Robert Cialdini's book on influence and his 6 factors of influence. I love the concept of being likability. I love the concept of business acumen, where you know what makes money for the business and what loses money for the business and how the functions interconnect and go. I always worked on presenting a foolproof presentation. And what I meant by that, so I could always tell what my business leaders would ask me. I'd always have the questions answered ahead of time. And I would do my research, and I would always go to like the most prestigious thought leaders in areas, and I would learn from them, and I would use that data. And honestly, a lot of times, and I had one manager tell me, Brent, you had the presentation one before you delivered it, and that's kind of what you want. You want to be able to anticipate what, because everybody's going to do the same thing. We tried that before. That won't work here. We're unique. We've got a lot of other priorities going on. And if you know those resistors, and they're common, I mean, I very seldom go to a meeting, well, how's this going to affect people and change? And how are we going to, they're the standard questions. And if you've done it long enough, you know what those standard questions will be or should be. And, and if you have the data behind you to back that up, and again, you always start small with prove your concept, pilot your concept, scale your concept, replicate. And so you've got to have that, and you've got to have your belief, And honestly, it's also hard work. I mean, I did it for 22 plus years in Shellen before that. And it's hard work. You're not always, half the people hate seeing you come, and half the people don't care if you come, and the other half of the 150, they'll say, hey, that's great. So it's you're always going to have that, because we deal, but this is why we need these human skills, because we need people to be smart enough to have short-term strategic thinking skills, extended thinking skills, and have this whole concept that they know what humanity and what people and relationships and all that do. That's what we were missing before. We were always slapping ideas against the wall, and they were very sterile, very gray. They weren't really integrating humans in the right way.
That's great insights, Brent. Suzanne Corta is asking maybe for some perspective here on any experience that you may have that people or organizations which are implementing digital transformation with a human component. Do you have an example of any organization that's currently implementing digital transformation with this human component? They're being successful at that, or at the time it's more of a concept?
Yeah, so there's lots of good examples. I'm happy to always take it offline with anybody that wants to talk to me after. We were doing a lot of things at Shell, like with iPads and digital content and things like that. And the first rule was we failed because we were always giving problems to consultants, external consultants, to go run away, give us a solution, and then a year later we'd land some iPad on an operator's lap and they'd say, what is this? That's not a problem anymore, I worked it out. Or, you know, whatever it might be. Or we didn't look at the human factors. You know, we'd give the operator an iPad, but they didn't want to carry that until we gave them a strap, so it made it easier to carry because they had other things in their hands too. Or we gave them an iPad, but so many confusing icons that they didn't know how to integrate well and do that. So these are the things you have to think about. You have to think about physically, what does digital transformation mean to an operator? Intellectually, what does it mean? Socially, all these. So for example, we digitized shift handovers. In the past, there were big sheets of paper that, you know, you had an operator supervisor had 20 sheets of paper, and they kind of summarized it, huddled, you know, and everybody huddled, and nobody was really, you know, listening to too much content. They digitized those. Now people could see it clearly of what was of interest to them. And the bigger thing is one process unit could see the reports of another process unit that they never saw or heard before, but it's somewhat relevant to their process unit. So we had extended thinking. And so these are the kinds of human factors, intellect, social things that we need to think about, and companies just aren't right now. And I guarantee you, if you start to look at how it's making the human feel more relevant, more purposeful, more useful, more valuable, humans will embrace digital if it works to help them. If it works to basically give more productivity to the plant, what's in it for them more? You know, I mean, it's not, you know, so it's those kind of things you got to think about.
Brent, another theme that emerged as you're discussing these topics is is trust. There is a perceived lack of trust in with organizations, you know, and senior leaders will say things like, "Hey, you know, our people are our most important asset," and then when the next NMA comes, you know, those same people are the first ones to go, and these assets are still on the field. So there's a contradiction there between what people say and what they actually do. They'll say that, oh, you know, again, you know, humans are most important in our business. But when you look at leadership development or talent development budgets versus technology development budgets, it's not even close. I mean, you're going to spend, you know, so boy, it's hard to develop trust when what you say and what you do is not aligned.
Right.
How do you overcome
exactly
that?
correct.
I mean, this is a big barrier here. I'm just curious. You have a lot of cross-industry experience here. I'm curious about your perspectives on that.
To me, it's an epidemic. And here's what's happening. We're putting a lot of leaders in roles that are new to leadership. Because they're new to leadership, they're insecure. Because they're insecure, they have low levels of trust and they want high levels of control. So what that means is they want to see everything, they want to micromanage everything, and that degrades the worker's spirit, their relevance, their importance, their purposefulness, their autonomy, their passion, all those things. And the other thing is consulting in big organizations and being in one, leaders at any level, they face the same kind of problems that people at lower levels do, just in a different scale. They have their insecurities, their concerns, their fears. And I think many organizations make their leaders fearful. And this idea of psychological safety, safety to challenge, you know, safety to ask questions, we don't have it. And it's because organizations aren't creating these environments. I know for a fact some organizations I work with, people would never challenge the leader. They'd have a big webcast, whatever. They would never challenge the leader. And I tried to ask them, does this leader ever get challenged? I mean, they've had 20 global webcasts. No one's ever asked a hard question. Why? You know, but the hard questions come in the water coolers in the hallways. So people are fearful, and they're fearful because the instability of the economy. They're fearful because, you know, the risk of unemployment. So it needs to be fixed. And organizations don't get it because they'd rather pay the price in problems they can't see, like the human problems, because people won't say anything, they kind of hide it, versus the problems that, oh, well, they can see technology problems, they can see, you know, this or that. So yeah, it's just that we've got to evolve, and we're not there yet, and most companies aren't.
Well
I mean,
said.
again, and I'll go back to this because, and this is one of my big soapboxes. The War for Talent came out like in 1997. The book from the, forget the McKinsey guy that wrote it. And the War for Talent, for 20 plus years now, it hasn't worked because it was about getting people to see the organization as an attractive place to work and hire them. Did nothing once they got in to make the experience good or keep them employable or want them to come in. What does that tell you? What were organizations thinking? We're going to shine up our penny, you know, get the Pied Piper to make us look really pretty. That's not authentic. They were just trying to compete for the best talent, get the best talent in. They got the best talent in, but they didn't do anything. They made the talent work to their conditions of what they created as the organization, you know, ethos.
Indeed, indeed. And Brent, Rob Yago or Jago, I'm not sure how you pronounce your last name, Rob. Apologize for that. He's asking a question related to that. You know, how do you work with leaders on innovation when they don't have the skill and experience with innovation? That's just one of the many related items you discuss here. A lot of leaders are in positions right now where really they're not equipped for the roles that they have, and really the significant changes that have happened, right? I mean, some of these leaders were groomed for like 10, 20 years to be in a certain role, but to do things that, you know, were done 20 years ago. And then all of a sudden that system is not, that economy, that business model is not the same. And so they are put in these positions now, and they've been groomed for these positions, but they may not be ready because the game has shifted.
Right.
And innovation is one of them. I mean, listen, you are not promoted for a long time for just being the most innovative person in the company. You are promoted for making sure that you manage risks and you do the appropriate things. And so innovation was not something that was that accentuated in succession planning. And now it has become one of the most important things. And now you have the leader that has been developed for a long period of time without that attribute. Boy, it's a tough situation. I mean, and you discuss, you know, we have to try to navigate that. We need to have courage. We need to have discipline. We need to help leaders navigate this because, as you said, they have the same insecurities that most of everybody else has.
It's the decades of work, and we haven't changed our institutionalized views of work. I take a look at leadership, for example. I believe that leaders should actually be certified, trained professional leaders, right? To make them say, well, you're a great technical person, so we're going to slap on some additional accountability. Because what I've seen is they're lousy at people development. It's not a priority for them. They're lousy at coaching. They're lousy at a lot of things. And so I'm seeing a lot of these things come in to be outsourced to say, look, let's take development of people off the leader. Let's take this off the leader. You know, because we put all these other administrative things on them to do. They're doing their own travel now. They're doing this now. They're doing that now. And so the system will collapse. And I think we need to be honest to say, you know, the way work is going to be designed in the future. And people have seen it through COVID. People said, I didn't need a leader. I was perfectly productive and my work did not dip in quality and I wasn't micromanaged. I was working from home, left alone to be autonomous, to do and deliver, and I did a hell of a good job. And so, you know, we've got to determine what's the new value of leaders in organizations. And I don't think we can put 1918 mental models of somebody working in a steel mill on a highly qualified, you know, connected worker of today.
Brent, it's always a pleasure to learn, share, debate, discuss with you about these topics, very relevant topics. I know you're out there in the industry working with a lot of leaders in implementing these mental models and mindsets and changes. So we appreciate you for that. And we very much appreciate you for sharing this wisdom with all of us today.
Thank you, Jose. It's always a pleasure. Anytime I get a chance to do something with you, I'm on board.
Thank you, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Brent Kedzierski, again, Chief Learning Officer, industrial futurist, and just overall great leader, sharing his wisdom and expertise of all of us. We are going to be wrapping up this. We're going to wrap up the session now, and we'll be back at the top of the hour with another great cross-industry leader of excellence, innovation, and transformation, talking about Mark McGregor, who's going to be coming directly to us from the UK. And Mark is going to be talking about the criticality and re-emergency of intelligent BPMs, but not as you know it. Mark always brings fresh perspectives on what's actually going on in the industry, what works and what doesn't work. So I look forward to seeing you at the top of the hour with Mark McGregor.